There are plenty of factors to consider in standing out from the world of manga. Yet what does it take to make art that will last for years? Much of it is based on trial and error, the state of the world, or the luck of the draw. Shonen Jump has been known to shift through countless authors and mangas about as often as wiping your ass. Some go on to attain success, while others are sent to the cutting room floor. One of these series was very close to that breaking point, and it was a very weird little story known as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It was on his second arc, and even after the main hero conquered the might of a literal god, the tiny manga was anxious about the future. Would he take his editor's advice and make the next chapter a tournament arc? It worked so well before, and Dragon Ball did it to much success. Everyone was doing it. Why go for something new when there is a moneymaker right in front of you? The temptation was palpable, yet this author was not like other ones. In the deepest pits of despair, he turned towards his editor and said deep from within his soul, "That I'm gonna make teenagers punch each other with ghosts." And thus began the publication of JoJo's third story arc, Stardust Crusaders. To say this thing was a game changer is nothing short of astounding. The epic journey across the ocean to face off against an evil from within the family's past captivated readers of all ages back in the late 80s to early 90s, spawning a legacy of not just popular tropes or unique gimmicks, but also memes. Oh, the memes. Oh, those precious memes that spread across the Indian Ocean. Hirohiko Araki's refusal to play into trends and keep his story relevant shocked many, turning his goofy manga containing vampires and people who punch with the power of the sun to vampires and people who punch with the powers of ghosts. Come on, there is a major difference there. Escaping his historical homages to a contemporary trek across modern-day Asia broke records, and is considered by many to be the most popular JoJo part of all time. So, in honor of the 10th anniversary of its anime adaptation and the original hit 35 years ago, I'll be discussing what made Stardust Crusaders work, how it changed over time, and just the overall wackiness of it all. Of course, there will be spoilers, so for all you newbies watching this, be advised that we are not holding your two right hands through this video. So then, where to begin? I guess we could start with this. To understand how we got to this point, we have to take a brief look into what JoJo was initially conscripted to be. Phantom Blood followed your typical Bram Stoker plots, with main protagonist Jonathan Joestar facing off against main antagonist Dio Brando, who is a vampire. Not the vampire you know from the books where they just bite you to suck your blood. No. These vampires have superpowers, like freezing people in place or shooting laser beams from their frickin' eyeballs. I did mention this was named JoJo's Bizarre Adventure after all. The series was following in the footsteps of another great Shonen Jump hit, and that was Fist of the North Star. The art styles for both share eerily similar designs, though with obvious deviations when it comes to moods and settings. This was an era of ripped, muscling men and over-the-top displays of power, fit right into a magazine for young teenage boys. The gothic setting did make JoJo stand out from the crowd, yet being that this was Araki's first big seller after his less successful mangas were dropped, there were sure to be kinks in the armor. The strongest element of part 1 was his hero and villain. Jonathan's pure heart mentality and selflessness contrasted greatly with the cunning and slimy deceitfulness of Dio. Yet when it comes to its supporting cast, they are hardly anything to write home about. I of course had to go through this part again for research, and I keep forgetting that there are actually 3 other characters added right after the death of Jonathan's mentor. Well, at least we got Speedwagon.
Right about now you're probably wondering who I am. Allow me to elucidate ya. The name is...
So the decision was made by the end to start the Shonen formula, and Jonathan Joestar was killed off by Dio while crossing the Atlantic Ocean. A surprise that Araki would be quite acute to do throughout his career. But without our main hero, what will come next? Well, a new JoJo, of course. As Araki put it, JoJo is in part about passing the torch across generations. Each part would then feature on a new Joestar to be the main protagonist, and to make sure readers weren't missing the lovable 6-foot gentle giant, Araki drew his successor Joseph Joestar to look similar to Jonathan in terms of his looks. Yet this JoJo was packing far more than that.
I knew the man was crazy, but not that crazy!
Part 2's Battle Tendency would see Joseph face off against not just a simple vampire like Dio, but instead a trio, yes, a trio of super muscly vampires that trumped Dio 10 times over. Joseph was very different from Jonathan in many ways, with his personality being more cocky, selfish, and pig-headed. Yet, what gets him out of trouble over impossible odds is his mind games and clever use of tactics, winning many of his fights not through Herculean might, but his sheer tenacity. The story of Part 2 is also more reminiscent of adventure serials, as it crosses over many locations and environments, mostly in pre-World War II Europe. And yes, that also includes these guys.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
To assume that Joseph's allies were just regular German soldiers would be awkward and terrifying for various reasons, and I'm not gonna get into that. But come on, you know what these guys are, and that is already uncomfortable just knowing.
You utter fool! German science is the finest in the world!
Battle Tendency certainly was a step up from the last one, with much better artwork, a much more engaging main character, and an enriching action-adventure that makes for great shonen storytelling. However, with that said, it wasn't hitting the numbers that Araki was hoping for. Sure, the mix-up of who drives the story forward was inventive, but readers weren't as thrilled about it. No matter how creative or daring the mangaka can make stories, he always felt that he wasn't fulfilled by how this one was going. The pieces were there, but it needed something more than just an entourage of closed-off tournament brawls. Thus, the idea of a manifestation of one's own will came into play, based on a 1954 manga called Tetsujin 28 Go. Instead of a robot, it was switched to a spirit representing the user's will to achieve the impossible. So the power system of Hamon fighters versus vampires was slowly phased out in favor of a new system that, when speaking on a coolness level, was way more captivating. As such, the era of stands was born. With a new driving hook for the series established, what would be another piece to attract even the concurrent readers? Why, by reintroducing the first major antagonist, Dio Brando, as just Dio, D-I-O, and having him enact revenge on the entire Joestar bloodline once again. After being retrieved from the Atlantic Ocean in the late 1980s, Dio has fused himself with the first protagonist, Jonathan Joestar's body, and is targeting the living Joestar heirs with his new stand powers. Yet the Joestars have also got stand powers too, and Part 3's main protagonist, Jotaro Kujo, has recently awakened his own named Star Platinum. One of the Joestars, however, has been stricken ill and is on death's door from her own stand awakening, and the only way to cure her ailment is to destroy Dio once and for all. With the help of comrades and enemies turned allies, the group dubbed the Stardust Crusaders venture on a harrowing journey to Egypt, whilst enemy stand users try to halt their progress. Many of them are based on the tarot cards, until being replaced by Egyptian gods upon entering Egypt. Until Araki just said, let's just name them after musical artists because he ain't afraid of no copyright infringement. Side note to the copyright concerns, it's pretty funny how several English localizations try to skirt around this issue, as while Japanese versions mostly keep the names all the same, it's certainly trickier when it comes to Western versions. So a lot of the names in JoJo had to be replaced with similar but bizarrely dumber names. Like Jay Guile had to be renamed Centerfold, Steely Dan to Dan of Steel, Devo to Soul Sacrifice, and Vanilla Ice to Cool Ice.
Oh, really? That sucks.
Okay, nomenclatures aside, Araki had a field day in crafting the stand's overarching effect on the JoJo series legacy. Starting with some of the biggest advantages, the stands allow for variety in the series shonen combat. You got your close-range, punchy stands like Star Platinum or Silver Chariot, but then you got stands that are better at long range like Kakyoin's Hierophant Green or Avdol's Magician's Red. Yet the most unique stands are those that don't necessarily require deadly precision to be effective. Stands like Joseph's Hermit Purple allows users to peer into and capture remote images, or Mariah's stand Bast, which turns whoever touches her manifested electrical outlets into a walking magnet. stands that can turn objects into killer modes of transportation, stands that can morph the user into different people. There are even stands that can stay active even after death, like the Anubis stand. It solves a major problem with the previous power system by allowing for flexibility in its presentation and direct intention. All fights between the main characters and Dio's assassins don't rely on who is stronger, but on how each user can tactically outmaneuver and outmatch their opponent in mind games. Some of the best encounters in Stardust Crusaders don't even rely on a single punch being thrown to be thrilling. The fight against Death 13 is a good example of this, with the user being an 11-month-old baby. And no, I didn't just pull that out of my ass, it's a baby stand user.
No way. He's only about 6 months old.
Wrong! I'm 11 months! Almost a year old!
The opponent has several key advantages that the main characters have to overcome. Death 13 is a dream stand, and is effective whenever someone falls asleep, and just like with Nightmare on Elm Street, if you die in a dream, you die in real life. However, unless you bring your own stand into the dream, you can't defend yourself against it. And even if you do figure out the secret, by the time you wake up, you don't even have any memory of that particular dream. And the fact that the identity of the user is unlikely to be discovered based on how ludicrous it might sound, and you can create some unique levels of suspense.
Lolly-ho!
Yet, if there is one stand battle that always gets me invested from beginning to end, is that of the Darby encounter. His stand has no physical strength to utter, yet its power lies in stealing the souls of whoever loses in a gamble. Thus, the user can't rely on their stand power to win. They alone are responsible for finding victory, and in Darby's case, is to deceive his opponent. So while there is hardly a punch thrown in this fight, it still lasts in the memories of many to be the most intense game of poker in manga history.
2 pair with 8s and 9s.
That's too bad. 2 pair, jacks and queens.
Heck, it was such a great concept for a fight that Araki would repeat it several times after, such as with Darby's younger brother or Part 6's Marilyn Manson. It's not even limited to just humans, as even animals can attain standards of their own. Although that still doesn't protect them from their greatest threat, Araki's weird trend of torturing animals just because. It stands to reason that the stand battles of Part 3 allowed for the series to be more diverse in how fights go from start to finish, something that was planted in Battle Tendency and it carries on to this day. Stardust Crusaders is also the start of where JoJo's comedy became more emphasized, with the best example being a pair of brothers trying to stop Jotaro and the gang in a routine that wouldn't feel out of place in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Later on, we would see this be executed to its premier best in Part 4's Diamond is Unbreakable in its Slice of Life chapters. However, I find the best thing about stands is that it allowed for fights and altercations to sometimes take a back seat for better characterization and story concepts. While the action of the previous parts is still there in spirit, this is where JoJo truly began to stand out. No pun intended. So with a focus on character over action, this leads us to the next best development of Araki as an author, and that is his main cast of goofy, boulder-shouldered protagonists. The titular Stardust Crusaders consists of 5 main characters: high schoolers Jotaro Kujo and Noriaki Kakyoin, walking gilf Joseph Joestar, fortune teller Mohammed Abdal, and the Frenchiest member of the gang, Iggy. Oh, and I guess there's Polnareff. When comparing the likes of this JoJo gang to future ones, there really isn't much to dissect with these guys. Although some of them would have fairly significant character arcs, it's hard to argue that Part 4, 5, and 6's characters are just written much stronger. Kakyoin and Abdul are probably good examples, as not a lot is done with their characters, besides Kakyoin being portrayed as an astute honor roll student and Abdul being the stoic badass, even though we kinda already have one with Jotaro.
Shut up! You're freaking annoying!
Yet even with that said, they could be seen as a templates for what makes their legacy last far longer than the others. In a vacuum, these characters can be seen as flat, but when placed together in situations that are rife with dramatic or comedic possibilities, that's where the strength of these characters truly shine. That can be explained with the character of Jotaro Kujo, a mix of the machinations of a Clint Eastwood character and the fashion choices of a delinquent. The drastic differences between Joseph and Jotaro are even more brazen than before, as Jotaro doesn't quite have that kind of warrior honor that Joseph has underneath his dexterity. Jotaro is a troublemaker, gets into fights, and has always been categorized as a loner. He even calls his mother a bitch, and it pisses off everybody, but he doesn't care. His motives are elusive, and that could be in how he has a tough time making connections. He may not be as outgoing with his feelings as Jonathan, but he still has that strong sense of right and wrong.
Even a bastard like me can spot true evil when he sees it. True evil are those who use the weak for their own gain.
That can be also applied to Polnareff's character as well, although he plays more of a comedic foil, and his revenge arc is quickly done away with after it's been introduced.
My name is Jean-Pierre Polnareff. For the honor of my dearest sister's soul, I'm going to hurl you into the depths of despair! Prepare yourself!
No, not that! Anything but that!
As for Joseph, he plays a much smaller role compared to the last go around, yet still has moments to show that he's still got that foxy instinct to escape impossible odds.
This will hurt me as much as it hurts you. But children can't depend on their parents forever. Once you've grown up, you've got to learn to live on your own!
The biggest factor that makes these characters stand out is Araki writing the characters with much more importance this time around. Think back to part 1 with an in-depth lens to the inner workings of characters outside of Jonathan and Dio. Hardly any of them have the same level of depth as the main two, and hardly play any role apart from being just the cheer squad. Part 2 is slightly better with their side cast, yet are still not given any form of development. Caesar Zeppeli gets close, yet he clearly needed more time in the spotlight. I guess he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now we have the Stardust Crusaders, and as flimsy as they may be in some attributes, they are still just as relevant and integral to the plot without Jotaro being involved. By the end of their journey, you get attached to these guys and closely relate to their sincere bromances. Scuba sign language moment with Kakyoin and Polnareff, Jotaro showing off parlor tricks to the boys, all builds on the audience truly caring about them. Even with the addition of a dog, every Joe Bro gets sufficient time in the sun, and despite some of them not lasting long to the end, it makes this group of characters stand out more than the others. Now, of course, the other Joe Bros that came after have a lot more progression and intrigue than these guys, such as in Part 4 and Part 5, yet what it all comes down to is how much time we have with the friends that make the journey all the more special. The Stardust Crusaders were trendsetters that broke the main protagonist getting the lion's share of the attention, though Jotaro still won the majority of the conflicts, but hey, at least it appeared in Part 1's cast like Dyer and Straits, and yeah, I might need to rewatch this part again. If Part 1 is Castlevania and Part 2 is Indiana Jones, then Part 3 is Around the World in 80 Days. This part was essentially Araki's travel journal made, well, bizarre. From the ports of Singapore to the vast and rich lands of India, and finally to the sands and culture of Egypt, this is a story that took our heroes from various locations, albeit with a little bit of cultural appropriation. And yeah, some of the accounts can be a little bit insensitive depending on how you read it. I'll give it some slack since it came out in the apex of the 80s, and Araki made sure not to get into anything too disputable. There is a section where the Crusaders skipped over a rock for obvious reasons.
Now you get the hell out of our country and don't come back! Good for nothing, asshole!
You do that, we'll allow you to leave here with your fingers intact!
However, while the world travel angle feels like an upgraded version of Part 2's globe-hopping adventure, the story being told is certainly something that would be pretty common down the road. Part 3 more or less has this monster of the week format to it, and you can certainly find how predictable it can be. It's a very simple read-and-drop style of storytelling, and it leads to similar outcomes. The heroes arrive in a new location, something abnormal takes place, one of them is picked out and finds out as they work up an enemy stand, fights that stand, and with sheer luck or help from an ally, defeats the user, and the whole thing resets to normal. There will be curveballs thrown in, but for the most part, it sticks to its own story beats. This can make the fights for several readers feel a bit par for the course, as each encounter, save for the finale, feels kinda like fluff. And yeah, they can be that way at some points. Araki has this thing where he loves setting in place how the story will begin and end, so the middle is just a journey to that destination, and that makes it enjoyable in my heart. The villains might be one note, but with their unique stand abilities, it makes for some thrilling set pieces. Some of them even have a familiar vibe and homage to various media that Araki personally loves, like Child's Play, Christie, Nightmare on Elm Street, you name it. He's much more interested in playing around with how characters interact with the environment than the story having to dictate the need for following a structure. And while trivial for some, it more or less makes Stardust Crusaders memorable and fascinating to read and or watch. While I did mention that the travel log accounts of the different Asian regions are contentious in their accounts, I do love some of the unique facts and travel locales that pop up from time to time, like how there's a weird amusement park in Singapore, or the methods of how to ride a camel through the desert from somebody who is clearly bullshit.
I will have you know that I've watched Lawrence of Arabia 3 times now from start to finish! Although 2 of those times I slept through half of it!
You learned to ride from a movie?
Yet the most memorable part of JoJo Part 3 is most definitely when the main antagonist makes his appearance once again. And with all that time built up through the escapades and the trials, the story really picks up and cranks out the drama surprisingly fast, which leads to Part 3's most iconic chain of events, which also highlights the various things that make this story arc pretty dang flawed. I've been pretty light on the critiques of JoJo Part 3 because of how much love I have for it. And whilst I can continue to sing its praises, I do want to address its many shortcomings.
What the hell?
I got a lot to say about the finale, but let's bring to light a common assessment of Araki's writing with the fact that he tends to forget certain aspects. And letting you know right now, this is going to start off with some nitpicky sections I find to be kind of funny. So I understand that Star Platinum has a short range to it, so how can it pick up items randomly from far away? I can assume his cell is near some sort of evidence locker or storage room, yet Jotaro's stand has never done anything out of that sort again unless counting the fight with the older Darby brother. Keep Star Platinum in check though, because he has some more coming. The Tower Grey user was put in the Stardust Crusaders' path as a deterrent to the group from using air travel, and not involve civilians in their adventure. Yeah, that last part that didn't really play out well. Yet it could have been easy enough to hop on another plane from Singapore to Egypt without facing any stand users until at least Cairo. Keep in mind it's just a hypothetical, and someone on the internet made a video on this exact scenario. It was really funny, and you should go check out more of her work. Link in the description.
They're what? They're what? Code Red, regroup, they got on another plane!
What the bloody hell is going on?
The whole plane is gone, tits up!
Star Platinum can extend his fingers, yet again is supposed to be a short-range stand, thereby eliminating its weakness because why not? This special move is only used 2 more times in the rest of the series. Joseph's Hermit Purple's power is fairly consistent in his application, and that could be from how it could just do about anything it wants when it comes to long-range surveillance. First, he destroyed a camera, but then he could tap into almost any electronic device, as well as ashes, which is an electronic.
With Hermit Purple? That's how you found the tar? A map out of incense ashes?
Star Platinum has the power to suck in a person's stand to suffocate the user, which, This stand is like the Swiss Army knife of plot convenience. Assuming that other users have flesh buds in them, these Stardust Crusaders are basically killing innocent stand users. Unless Kakyoin and Polnareff were the only 2 good souls in that bunch. Otherwise, oops. So with stand power, you can shrink your stand's body to microscopic levels. Is there a limit to how long you can use your stand and how much you need to expand its energy? It's never even brought up again until part 5. So now stands can create their own pocket dimensions? That kinda just throws Kakyoin's whole tirade about stands not existing in mirror dimensions.
Remember, this is reality, not fantasy.
You sure about that?
Too bad there ain't a literal man in the mirror to throw that logic to the curb. How in the f did Abdul survive this? That bullet clearly hit you square in the head. Just because you looked up doesn't mean it at least scraped a few bits of brain matter. Also, the service to my man Mohammed Abdul is kind of funny. Araki brings him back because of fan service, but then kills him immediately near the final boss.
I suppose this is what one would call a blessing in disguise.
Wait, so now stands can just be manifested into objects? I can understand animals and maybe a baby, but a sword, especially one that looks completely alien to the region it's based in, kinda strange. If this guy's supposed to be a vampire without us knowing, don't those holes he made make it more likely for sunlight to go through? How much time needs to pass for someone to turn into a vampire through blood contact? Otherwise, he would have disappeared right after he stepped out of the void.
Now go to hell, asshole.
How does time work in Dio's The World? How do you track the amount of seconds in stop time? Does he keep a tracker in his head about this stuff? Also, why do you need to be in short range distance to activate it? Then again, given the nature of all the other time powers in JoJo's, this is honestly the most simplest. To this day, I don't even know how the King Crimson's time shenanigans are supposed to work. How can two stands exist with similar time powers? Star Platinum can stop time as well. Oh my god, this is the Swiss Army knife of plot conveniences. And blood is one hell of a drug if it can just bring somebody back from the dead through a simple blood transfusion and heart manipulation. Dude was tried up like a mummy and still managed to survive. Probably because it wasn't his first time. Bow chicka bow wow. So yeah, Araki loves to play around a little bit too much in the sandpit, which does lead to inconsistencies in the storytelling. Yet the thing I know while analyzing author and artists is that making engaging narratives is hard fucking work. And at some points, yeah, you can't always be perfect in the way you can structure things from moment to moment.
I'm going to roll all over you!
This section was mainly to highlight the quirky nature of Part 3's narrative, and how it doesn't detract from his misses despite my praise and love for it. Yet for some reason, I almost wouldn't have it any other way. Is it boring to see Jotaro win every fight? Yeah, but I much enjoy how he's able to get out of it through some ridiculous feat or ability never seen before, and be just as perplexed when it never comes up again. Does the story need this many henchmen? Probably not. However, if you're a reader reading weekly at the time this was coming out, you would have been just excited as I was when wanting to see what crazy powers were coming up next.
That's right. We're good.
This manga is not something to take seriously. It's something to be enjoyed and have a good time with. Others that try to pull this whole thing off but are more serious in nature are more likely to trip over and fall flat, making people less opted to continue on. Araki is one of only a select few that can get away with it, and eventually he got so used to it that now it isn't so much of an issue anymore. Araki might sometimes forget, but what he doesn't forget about is making a really good manga. There is a quote from Araki in his book about the methodology of his work in manga storytelling, in which he discussed the theme of JoJo's overall. He said, JoJo's theme is a paean to humanity. In other words, an affirmation that mankind is wonderful. When the characters in JoJo are faced with adversity, they find a solution and forge a path onward by their own abilities and never by some convenient coincidence. Convenient coincidence. Oh, look at me, my stand is very similar to your stand. Keep in mind this was made decades into the craft, so take this with some context. Although Stardust Crusaders isn't by all accounts a masterpiece in the eyes of many, I do find it to be one of my all-time favorites in the JoJo series, along with Diamond is Unbreakable. It's not perfect, but for some folks, perfection doesn't dictate that it's better than others or that it should lack it. People have a unique complexion to what they love, and I love everything about Stardust Crusaders. Yet, what I appreciate most about watching this part over and over again is not the stands or the moments that people meme like crazy, but the journey itself. I look back at the little moments between these people and their interactions with the world around them, how they bounce quips off each other or fight side by side, how Jotaro goes from a loner to a team player and actively begins to care about the many people he views as friends, something he would take with him later on. It's a story about redemption and belonging, as each Crusader has something to lose if their mission fails. And even when the situation gets out of hand or gets beyond ridiculous, they will always stand on top. Why does JoJo want to stop Dio? Simple. He pissed him off. And as basic as that can be, it's Dio's overall reluctance to accept the obvious that fails him yet again. A repeat of what happened with Jonathan Joestar in the 1800s. It's why I feel a genuine integration with these wacky buff supermodels. I'm pretty sure you've had a time in your lives where you and your buddies went on an adventure by your own wishes, with some sort of goal in mind. Yet that night on the town or weekend abroad turned upside down, with some of you coming out changed and yearning to repeat that same experience, even when it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I mean, it sucks that you don't have spiritual ghost powers like Jotaro in the gang, but you did come out of it with a hell of a story to tell. The people you met, the hijinks that ensued, and the bonds you formed. We all had that experience in our lives, and it's why I absolutely love this JoJo part more than other better written Araki fairs. Not because it's flawless, but because it's charming, imaginative, and just fun. That's why Stardust Crusaders is so beloved. That's why Araki is a household name in the Japanese manga industry, and that's why it's one of my favorite parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So, we gonna mention that part where an orangutan got a boner for a 12-year-old girl? I want to say to all of you guys, thanks so much for watching today's video, and I want to see your thoughts on Stardust Crusaders. Is it good? Is it bad? Can you tell me how time works inside Dio's stop time, because I am lost as hell in it. Like, subscribe, and push that notification bell to never miss my uploads. Also, if you want to see the uncensored version of this video, or just want early access before it comes up on YouTube, you can subscribe to my Patreon. It's your bra man, walking like an Egyptian.